Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 25th RNCI Red Nation International Film Festival. This is our Indigenous Filmmakers Lounge, the Conversation series. And before I introduce and spotlight our film and our director, I'm going to share with you a little bit about what's been happening with the festival. We're day 23 out of 30. So you have 1 week left to watch 105 films, 73 documentaries, 35 films directed by women, 12 student films, and 10 experimental. We've been having events with a total of 16 events, as well as our 28 conversation series with our filmmakers. So it's been going really, really well. The tickets have been extraordinary. We're noticing that so many people are interested in our narrative, our Native narrative, and how relevant that is today. So because it's the last week of our festival, you could binge. Well, all week because it's the holiday and most cities are closing down. I'm in Los Angeles and live from Los Angeles, and all the restaurants are closed down, no more restaurants, and curfew. So what to do? Go to rednationff.com and experience the Native narrative of 105 films. November 29th is Hollywood and Indian Country's biggest night. It's our Red Nation Award ceremony, and you could get a ticket. And when you purchase a ticket, this is the thing, this is the deal, as our new president would say. You get to be in like this whole Zoom room exclusively, and get to sit in with our presenters and actors and directors and nominees and film and other filmmakers, and it's going to be really special. So it's like our fan experience for those film enthusiasts who want to hang out with Native celebs and our allies. So you could go to rednationff.com and pick up a ticket. And then we're going to end the month, November 30th, with our concert series, Artists in Solidarity, for creating systemic change in art, film, media, music, everything. So we have Joe Walsh, we have Jennifer Warnes, we have Joanne Shenandoah, we have Hook Herrera, we have Corey Morbid. I mean, there's a whole roster of names. Ronnie Blakely. I mean, there's every day people are getting added on. So go to rednationff.com and visit all the beautiful films and the events that are still happening this last week of the festival. Binge on Native narrative. So now I'd like to introduce our filmmaker, and our spotlight film is Essence of Goodness, the Harold Axtell story. And I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Yeah. And our guest filmmaker is Chris Derton.
Close enough.
We'll say it correctly, because that's a big joke over here. This whole festival is like, Janelle, you get it right.
Chris Darton.
Darton. Okay. So Chris, welcome to the festival. And I'm so happy that you entered your film, you submitted your film. Your film is very important. And I'd like to ask you a question. What inspired you to pick this subject matter? And then we'll go into what the film is about.
Well, I was pretty fortunate. I made a little 9-minute short film on a gentleman in my hometown area. And it went so well, and we got along so well. He approached me afterward and he said, listen, I've got somebody who was a big part of my life. He was a mentor of mine. And he passed away a number of years ago. And not a lot of people know who he is. And I think he was an important figure. He was certainly important to him. but I think he was even bigger than that. I think he was people should know about him. So he approached me and asked me if I would work on a documentary on him. And it didn't take much for me to say yes. As soon as I kind of found out what Harold Axtell was about and a little bit of his story, just absolutely fascinating gentleman. And for me, taking part in a important, interesting, and enlightening story like that is just everything. It means everything. So that's kind of how I got involved. Um, and it was just a great relationship and a great project. I'm really happy it landed on my lap. It was just one of those lucky things, really.
Right. And so where are you coming live from? Where are you right now?
I'm live from southern Ontario in the Niagara region, about 25 minutes from Niagara Falls is kind of the best earmark for people to kind of know where I am. I'm not too far from the border into Western New York, Buffalo, and that's kind of where I grew up, was right on the border. So I'm not too far from there.
And what nation are you from?
I'm Métis. I am Ojibwe, which we were Chippewa, but I mean that got kind of twisted
You
around.
know what they say about Chippewas? No, I'm just teasing.
So yeah, my family was from Moose Factory. We were Métis, upper northern Ontario. Hard living, fur traders and fishermen and hunters, and essentially life changed with the fur trade for my family. Um, a lot of the men who were involved in the fur trade um, eventually became railway men and worked their way down south some, and that's how the family ended up where we are. But we started way up there. Yeah, 60 below zero at night, my great grandmother used to say.
Wow.
So
Wow.
yeah,
Well, we're still here, we're still here and we're resilient. And so that's the good thing. So
absolutely.
let's talk about your film, because I could read from a piece of paper, what your film was about.
Yeah,
But I'd like for you to share, because you made this film. So I'd love
sure.
for you to share.
So the film is about a half an hour documentary on the life of a gentleman named Harold Axtell. And when you talk about the most fascinating, interesting men you've ever heard of, this guy falls firmly into that position. And it's funny because he actually lived in my hometown and I didn't know who he was. He passed away in the early 90s. Harold was born in the early 1900s. And he was born in upstate New York to a very religious family, very strict upbringing, um, tough upbringing. And Harold kind of broke free with music. Music was kind of his getaway. But before that, even, he had already at a very young age, he really ingrained himself into nature. He was already doing observational work on birds and raccoons and skunks and really every animal. He was a fascinating man, and he was actually writing journal entries and diaries when he was 9 and 10 years old, and drawing detailed pictures of what birds look like in his area and stuff like that. And what happened was is he ended up going to college and joining a band and traveling the world in the big band type jazz type music in the 1920s. He got to go to France, toured Europe and everything. So he led this wonderful early life once he broke free from the kind of the restraints of his family and upbringing. And interestingly, when the music ended, a few years later, Harold didn't know what to do. He was kind of, I love music, I love that part of my life, but where do I go from here? And a member of the band that he really looked up to looked at him and said to him one day, Harold said to him, "So what are you going to do now that the band is done and this kind of phase is done?" And the member of the band looked at him and said, "Well, I'm going to start doing a lot of rational thinking. So, I mean, we're talking like the 1920s, and Harold really didn't register with him. He didn't really know that term. So then he started turning the corner of his life and became a thinker and an educator and a researcher. So here was a man born in the 1900s who eventually he was a musician, he was a gambler for a short period of his life, he was a scientist, he was an ornithologist, a bird expert, he was a naturalist, just absolutely fascinating. And sometimes making a film like that, because Harold's been gone since the 1900s, or sorry, since the early 90s. He was born in the early 1900s. So it's tough because you don't have Harold to interview. So you gotta kind of go about it a different way. So I had a few people that he had mentored and were bird experts from around North America that were friends with his. And luckily, Harold left an entire legacy of documents, which is really unlike what a lot of people do in their lives. I mean, now there's this trail of us being online and
Right.
hard drives of information and digital photography. Well, Harold had photos of himself from the 1930s and 40s still. He had notes on recipe cards that he wrote out in the 1940s, defining what happiness is in his life,
Wow.
defining goals and where he's going to go in his life. Um, he kind of was when I start digging through a lot of his stuff, and it was um, extensive boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff. He really was on the trail of self-help and self-realization long before it became fancy in books and popular. This man was writing about where his life path would go as early as the 1930s and 40s, and he would keep everything. So it was really, really fascinating story. It was just an extremely interesting individual, that's for sure.
So I could tell by your share that you love storytelling and that you love filmmaking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who inspired you to become a filmmaker?
Well, I went the art path. I actually I, I started drawing when I was really young, and that was my 100% main goal in life, was to be an artist, and in particular, comic books was my thing. And I ended up going away to school for a year for it, and it didn't really work out, and I ended up in film, and I was making films as a kid. I had a really loyal, dedicated group of lunatics here that lived around me. We made films and we drew and we watched movies, and they never questioned anything crazy that we wanted to do and that. So I ended up veering into film, and I came back to live a small town life after living near Toronto and going to school for a few years. And I screen wrote for a number of years.
Oh,
And I really didn't have that big success. I did okay with it, but I didn't have that big breakthrough. So what I did was, at 46 years old, I sold my comic book collection.
how old are you?
I turned 55 today.
Oh my God. Happy birthday.
Thank you very
Happy
much.
birthday
Thank
to
you.
you.
Yeah, thank you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, our Red Nation filmmaker, Chris. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you. So I just decided that I could probably kind of keep doing this ongoing screenwriting thing, and maybe it might never happen.
Yeah.
So I sold the only thing of value I had, my old comic book collection,
Oh
and I went out
no.
and bought a camera. I
Oh
bought a
wow.
couple cheap lights. I bought a microphone, and I thought, well, now that I've got this stuff, what can I do? Pretty tough to do a drama or a comedy. I didn't really have that circle of people. I was in my 40s, so everybody was married and had kids and was working. So I decided I'll start making a documentary.
Yeah.
I had I had a really strong connection in the blues industry in Canada, who was a good friend. And I decided I knew a lot of his circle of friends and family. So I thought I'll make a documentary on blues music in Canada. So I actually, right out of the gate at 46, I started shooting my first feature. I completed it at 48. And I turned around, it took me about 16 months to make. And literally a month or two later, I started shooting my second feature length film. So I made two features back to back. And since then, I've made a number of short documentaries, promotional videos, music videos, stuff like that. And then the other side of Chris Darton is I produce horror movies as well.
You do.
So
We
that's
gotta talk.
I've produced a couple of short horror films that have done really well.
Oh,
And I'm currently right now producing my first feature length horror film. We'll be shooting next year, but yeah, it's uh,
wow.
it's great. So basically, I've really been active. If you went from the goal point of finishing my first feature, it's really only been 7 years,
Yeah.
and I've worked nonstop.
Yeah.
And I feel the clock ticking a little bit. So I've really kind of pushed hard. I'll work on multiple projects at once, and it's just gone really well. And then I did something crazy 2 years ago and decided to go to university.
I like
After,
crazy.
after yeah, I'm just on the verge of finishing my last. I've got a test this week. I have my final exam next month in December, and
Wow.
uh, and I'm done university. I'll have my bachelor's degree in Indigenous studies.
Oh, fantastic. So
Yeah,
we'll circle back to you when we're doing our master classes. Good.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I've been working on a horror film for 8 years.
Oh, wow.
We've been close to funding. I think this 2021 we're going to be able to accomplish it. Make
Congratulations.
it. Yeah. But I'll talk to you. I'll circle back around.
Yeah, it's certainly I can't talk in terms of the United States because it's a different animal as far as
It
how we
is.
how we fund and take care of the arts.
Oh,
Cer-
yeah.
Certainly Canada, we've got a lot of things are government funded.
Yeah.
We don't have that private financing. We don't have
Right.
those type of things happen. So
Right.
it's tough here. I mean, it's interesting. I never really let it get me down. I'll
Right.
jump into a project. I've got
Right.
projects that are my own.
Yeah.
I'll self-fund. And then every once in a while, I've got people that'll come along and that are interested in something and they'll finance a project for me.
Yeah.
But the feature film thing, especially with horror, is really daunting. It's really,
Why?
it's really tough.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm still 8 years in. So,
Well, so when you're talking about financing a feature-length horror film in Canada, and obviously I can pitch for Indigenous funding, but they want Indigenous projects. So, um, for the most part, right? Not always, but for the most part. So for me to pitch a horror film, whether I'm pitching it as, you know, for Indigenous funding or for regular funding, it's tough. They,
oh,
you know, the days of David Cronenberg in the 1970s and being able to secure um, tax exempt monies and stuff like that, that ship sailed a long time ago.
mhm.
So it's a funny thing. It's
Yeah.
and I'm pretty fearless. So I mean, I'll jump
I
into
know
this.
it
This
too.
is going to be a pretty big film, and the low end of it, which it'll probably come at the low end, is going to be around $10,000.
Yeah.
But I'm very fortunate though. I've got a really dedicated, loyal group of people around me who are filmmakers and actors and people just itching to do something. So if I'm the catalyst, it helps, kind of get things moving and stuff like that. So it'll be a very interesting project.
Yeah.
And I'm working on other stuff too, but That's my big one.
Yeah. Well, make sure you enter it into the festival when it's done.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm actually currently working on my first Indigenous themed documentary as well. So
Okay.
yeah, I've got a lot on the burner.
Yeah. Fantastic.
I'm
So,
fortunate. I'm fortunate. I've got a wife that supports all this craziness. So
yeah. Yeah. That's good.
yep.
Well, I want to ask you before we wrap up. What was your aha moment in making your film, or maybe your most challenging moment in making this film?
When I first started this film, we actually had a really talented, seasoned writer from my area, and he had been brought in and he actually wrote a script for it. And it was a really wonderful little script. It would have made probably a great dramatic little film on Harold Axtell. It was kind of leaned toward more of that kind of vibe. And I shot for about one afternoon and I sat back and I looked at the footage and it said, this kind of isn't how I make films. I mean, I'm very, very regimented. I'm very organized, but I'm also very on the fly as far as capturing a moment or, being able to pull off a good interview with somebody who, stuff like that. So what I did was I really switched gears and kind of went the Chris Darton route on it. And I think it's, I think it came out great. I think it was just a matter of relating the Indigenous part of me with the fact that Harold Axtell was a person that was really connected to the environment and
Yeah.
nature. And a light bulb went off and it was like, oh yeah, this isn't the right route to go.
Mm.
I need to kind of follow my heart and go this route. And I think it worked out for the best. And that,
Yeah.
it's a really nice little film, I think. So
Yeah, it is. It is.
thank you. Thank you.
Well, Chris, I'm happy that you made this film and
Thank you.
that people out there have the opportunity to learn about this man
Yeah.
and his endeavors and everything that he was about. And to watch this film, go to rednationff.com and experience Chris's film. And we look forward to having more conversations with you, Chris. And we'll see you at the award ceremony, the concert series, and we'll be
Well,
sending links to everybody. So,
yeah. Thanks very much for having me. And I should probably say that
yeah.
this is a fantastic festival. I really think it is.
Oh,
I've been in the last 7 or 8 years, I've been lucky enough to have films of mine and being entered and submitted and get into a number of festivals, but this is certainly one of the nicest run festivals. And I mean, the fact that you're doing it over an entire month is just monumental. But then
oh,
you're doing discussion panels and just the amount that you're putting out there to the public, in seeing the film, stuff like that. Just, yeah, it's because for me, this is the hardest part.
yeah.
I can work on films nonstop and be completely, totally gratified and love doing what I'm doing. And, but to get over that hurdle and get across the finish line and have an audience see it is really the difficult part for somebody making really low budget films like I'm making. So I really appreciate this.
You're welcome, and I appreciate you for making films. We need more filmmakers and up and coming filmmakers. So I'm going to ask you one last question.
Sure.
For emerging filmmakers out there, what would you like to share with them, or someone that's thinking about being a filmmaker?
I think I think Robert Rodriguez said this years ago,
Yeah.
that you need to learn everything in the business. I mean, you don't have
Mhm.
to be an expert behind the camera or the greatest editor in the world or the greatest director. You can kind of have your area of expertise and strength, but you kind of need to know a little bit about everything because somewhere down the line, you need to answer questions about how you're going to handle this or that. Plus, once it's done, there's a whole business end
Yeah,
because pardon me, it is a film business.
it's absolutely.
And that took a long time for me to learn. I was that real creative type ball of fire, writing and drawing and making films. But to get something made and be able to send out an email, a professional email, or approach a magazine, or, write a newspaper, or, to review your film, or whatever, that whole business end of it takes a lot of practice in that as well. So I think you need to know a little bit about everything.
Yeah, I agree. And what we offer our filmmakers, even if like all of our filmmakers that have submitted, all of our filmmakers that were official selections, have the opportunity to have their film stream on our Red Nation television network. So that's something we offer. It's, a lot of times we wait till after the festival and after your film goes through the festival circuit, and you may pick up distribution, you may not. But in any case, know that you have a seat at our table, and we totally encourage you to reach back out to us to have your film stream on our television network. In regards to Red Nation Television Network, we were online streaming before Netflix or Hulu or OWN or anyone. It was the first online streaming television network. And I think maybe YouTube was doing a little bit of streaming, but anyway, visit rednationff.com and see Chris's film. And Chris, the title of your film.
Essence of Goodness, the Harold Axtell story.
I'll see you at the movies. And thank you, Chris, for joining us today.
Thank you, Kylie. I really appreciate it. Miigwech.
Bye, everyone.